I firmly do believe that self-leadership is fundamental in helping others to develop. Thus, my presentation focuses on your own development as an instrument of change. I will briefly introduce the full model of ego development I have been developing for the last 40 years, and you all have a little thing in your that describes it. As you heard, later stages are generally more flexible, more capable of seeing the big picture, and open to ambiguity and not knowing than earlier ones. Yet they are not inherently better. Life is not about your stage as measured on some scale. It is more a matter of the fit between you, your personality, your attitude to life, your likes and dislikes, as well as your changing life circumstances and the demands and responsibilities of your work. You have all seen the development process described as a ladder or as a spiral. I introduced the arc model as a metaphor of development. Next I will ask the question of how to be a good person, no matter where you are right now on the growth path. When we strive to embody our highest human values, we contribute towards a wiser, more compassionate world in which to share our gifts. Finally, I will also give you some practical suggestions of ways to develop yourself to become mature role models at work, at home, and as a member of the human race. It's already up. The arc of the Leadership Maturity Framework describes 8 stages of increasing insight and capacity to deal with life in caring and non-defensive ways. In general, we can say that adult development moves from simple to more complex ways of understanding oneself and the world. As newborn babies, we are completely one with Mother, but we are not conscious of this unity. We then get socialized into a particular family, group, society and culture and learn a particular language to communicate. For a long time after Piaget, this description of how the child's mind develops to adulthood, we assumed that human development was finished around age 20, when we had acquired the capacity for formal operations and rational deliberation. The first half of the arc describes conventional development towards becoming an independent adult with a separate identity. Stage 4 persons, or what Bob would say, the self-authoring self, have clear boundaries. They can reason, consider outcomes of actions, and solve problems through logical analyses. Stage 4 represents the Western, rational, scientific, and linear view of progress. It believes that with the right technologies and experiments, we can find out how humans and the universe work. If not now, then in the future with better tools. Moreover, it believes in progress and in improving humankind through external efforts. If you look at the distribution in our data, 70 to 80% of adults operate in the left half of this arc. Then in the 60s, the field of post-Piagetian and post-conventional adult development was born. The post-conventional side of the arc is far less populated. Only about 15 to 20% of individuals make sense of life at stage 4, 5 or later. Post-conventional implies that people become aware of how they have been socialized or programmed to see the world in a particular way. Post-conventional adults recognize that creating clear boundaries between self and others is a necessary step and part of growing up, that this separation is artificial since we're all part of nature and interconnected. While the Newtonian stage 4 mindset leads to great scientific discoveries, but particle physics has shown that the boundary between observer and observed is elusive. Post-conventional individuals realize that they are not neutral observers, that are always interpreting experience. They question unexamined beliefs and assumptions. They can hold multiple perspectives, see the big picture and the long-term and unintended consequences of collective action and inaction, such as global warming. The unitive stage, the last one in this sequence, finally expresses the full realization of our non-separateness. This time, however, the experience of unity is conscious, unlike that of the infant. As shown in this brief overview of the leadership maturity framework, growth can be described as an arc. We develop from total dependence as infants to maximal separate personhood at stage 4, then slowly dissolve the former boundaries towards greater and greater unity and interdependence with everything. But let's not forget, like all models, the leadership maturity framework is just a map, a simplification. Development is not as clean and unidirectional as the arc may indicate. Next, you get a chance in paired activity to discuss what development is really like. I would like you to find a partner just next to you, and you have a minute or so each to talk about how this image is actually more realistic about development than our beautiful models. How does that relate to your own growth? What can we see? Does it go in one direction? All of that. Just talk to each other. Find your neighbor and see what it resonates for you. To share with us what you found or what you read. So, what this picture relates to your own experience of growing, or whether you really see yourself as a spiral, or stepwise moving on. What does this elicit in you?
It's not messy enough.
Thank you. Any other observations?
Ups and downs.
Ups and downs, sideways. Sometimes the road is hidden.
You can't really plan for a transformation.
Mm-hmm. We don't even know where the end is. It's a matter of perspective.
I'm everywhere at the same time.
Yes. Okay, and so what I would like to say is this. Self-development is non-linear, messy, wonderful word, challenging, up and down, and sideways. And it is possible with curiosity, practice, and patience. Development is not like a step ladder. One does not grow to later stages and wider perspectives with an achievement mindset, sort of trying very hard to climb that ladder. Yet adult development theories are useful as orientation maps. They can help us identify what may be next for us in terms of challenges and benefits. While we experience new kinds of fulfillment with each new perspective, we also encounter new challenges and suffering. It is a widely held illusion that reaching later stages will make us happier and more complete. Let me remind you that most adult development is horizontal. We learn from attending courses, acquiring new skills, and transferring what we know to new contexts. Such learning is very valuable and far more common than vertical development. Vertical development means transforming your view of the world. It changes who you are and expands your definition of reality. The development journey is complex. We are not operating at one stage only. In our data, most people inhabit at least 3 stages. We can regress. We experience temporary regression or fallback when we behave under stress from earlier stage but know that we are doing so. We all fall back under stress, sudden change in circumstances, or when we are sick and tired. However, we can recover and become our preferred selves again. Permanent regression is different. It can occur after catastrophic life events and towards the end of life when our mental and emotional capacities dim. In that case, we can become like children and lose all access to our prior insights and adult functioning. And interesting to me now that I'm older is adult development theories often don't include the whole life cycle. Thus, I invite you to contemplate the following Gauguin painting. Just take to yourself, take a minute and look at this painting. It hangs in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts and depicts the phases of life. And the text in French on the upper left corner is translated. Here are these 3 questions that Gauguin asked. They're fundamental human questions. There's not a culture, there's not a place that doesn't in some way answer these. And just enjoy the beauty of this painting as well. Take it in. That's all very well, you may say, but what can we do to become more developed? How can we contribute our gifts and make life better for everybody, from our families to our organizations and to the world? I will share one way of how, by practicing and enacting some universally found virtues or values. Since ancient times, moral values have been part of understanding human nature. To have conscious values distinguishes us from other creatures. We develop when we choose to live up to our ideal selves and dare to face the challenges of doing so. 2,500 years ago, Confucius mentioned wisdom, compassion, and courage as beacons of our human potential. It takes courage to grow and to step out of the familiar and explore something new regardless of where we find ourselves on the developmental journey. Let me illustrate how courage plays out moment to moment by introducing a model, the zones of risk model. Another model. You can just blow it away. Nope. That's that. So we talk about the zone of safety, the known, what you already know, the status quo, the place where we are on autopilot. Nothing much happens here. We are functioning well, but we don't learn necessarily. Maybe some horizontal learning, but not really new. We are not really changing. We're safeguarding what we know. The next one we call the zone of risk and learning. It involves experiments. We don't know yet, but we can at least conceive. We have an idea what could be. And it's what we call the growing edge, or the possibility for expansion. And then we have the zone of transformation, which is a danger zone in some ways, because it really means that that we cannot predict what will happen. We may panic, feel like dying, be utterly confused and stretched to the limit. And it also has the potential to transform, to really shift us into a whole new way of looking at things. The interesting thing for the last one is that we don't need to try and get there, because life will inevitably take bites out of us from that area. The zone can also be described as single loop, double loop, and triple loop development. In single loop, you just try different approaches to the same goals. You've heard some prior from that kind of approach, what you heard this morning. You remain safe and unchanged. In double loop learning about yourself, you reflect on the original goals and change them to match what is important to you now. In triple loop learning, your self-identity is at stake. It requires letting go of who you thought you were and experience yourself as a mystery and as an ongoing process of becoming. According to Confucius, wisdom, compassion, and courage are universal attributes of human beings. Let me suggest a few more growth values that will support you in your self-development. First, an open mind, and curious mind is necessary for ongoing development. If you are the more cautious type, it pays to start with small steps outside the safety of your familiar nest. If you're naturally curious like myself, your safety zone is larger and you get into more trouble, and your edge is further out. Spending more of our time in the zone of risk inevitably helps you grow. The second growth value is courage, also mentioned by Confucius. It comes from the French for having heart. I use it here to indicate the courage necessary to overcome one's reluctance to leave the zone of the known and encounter life as an open adventure. You'll likely agree with me that being an adult is tough, and growing old is not for the faint-hearted. Courage means that we take heart again and again, even when in utter darkness. Courage invites us to say yes, yes to life, no matter what. Oops, oh, that was okay. The third growth value is tolerance. With an open door attitude, you welcome whatever and whomever you encounter. You appreciate all the many ways we are different from each other. Moreover, you can forgive yourself when you don't live up to your ideal self. You show compassion for self and others for being human. We all like to see ourselves as heroes, as being the masters of our destiny. Only at the very late stages of development do we begin to question the idea of achieving some sort of perfection. We may even see through our desire to become enlightened. All such efforts are the workings of the ego that always wants to be in control of everything. Ironically, it will even try to control letting go of control. Finally, the fourth value I would like to mention, when we have an open hand, we realize that we need to share and be generous in our actions, thoughts and feelings. We have to leave behind the mindset of scarcity and come from a sense of abundance. We need to connect with others with whom we share our small planet home and its resources. When you actually look back from space on our planet, you don't see separate nations. So we really all hang in this together and fall together. Unfortunately, the current economic pressures are based on a scarcity model. We're constantly bombarded with messages that we need to have more stuff and we have it now. It's competition for everything. Yet humans yearn for emotional bonds and connection. We want to belong to something bigger than our separate selves. Indeed, we can bridge our divisions with empathy and a deep sense of kinship with other human beings. When we acknowledge the human kinship, we can aspire to carry out our individual and collective responsibility towards each other. An open mind, an open heart, an open door, and an open hand are four of the virtues that we can all strive to express in our everyday life. Keeping them present can help us make choices away from mindless, fear-based, and self-protective actions towards being connected to our fellow passengers in life with increasing wisdom, discernment, and compassion. By learning to embody more of the gross values, we can expand beyond our current way of being, regardless of the starting point on the developmental trajectory. This is really a central point of my presentation, is it doesn't matter where you are. There's always ways to grow. Take a minute now and just examine which of these growth values you feel you already possess and which ones seem aspirational and worthy of more practice. Some of these you may even have chosen on your values tree. Just think about it. Which ones are already natural and part of your being, and which ones you might actually intend to practice a bit more. We all know them in the abstract, but how do we actually embody them, implement them? And of course you can continue the conversation at lunch and when you look at the values you have chosen for your own values tree. How can we connect with strangers? It is with deep listening. Every time you are in the presence of another human being, be it a child, wife, boss, client or stranger, imagine what it is like to be them, to live in their shoes, see with their eyes and so forth. Get a sense of their personal story and context. Appreciate them for their unique way of having come to this moment of your encounter. What can you learn from them? What do you think their concerns and worries are? Can you step over your natural tendency to react with preconceived notions about how people like that are? Are you daring to unlearn automatic categorization and judging? Practicing not knowing and being curious is the kind of exercise that inevitably expands your capacity to hold and appreciate more and more not only of your own experience and development, also that of others. Appreciating and treating other human beings is a prerequisite to truly understand and support them in their development. And Buddha had a beautiful phrase: no matter how educated, talented, rich, and cool you are, you believe you are, how you treat others ultimately tells us all. Ask yourself, who do I consider my family? For whose well-being do I feel responsible? The more you embrace all human beings as your own kin, the more connected you are to our shared human lot, and the better you can support others in their meaning-making. For the rest of the day, and when you're back in your everyday life, notice when you care about and who doesn't get your attention, because they're outside your normal circle of care. Notice the positive effect on you when you actually practice compassion for everyone. Now that I have prepared you to think of self-leadership in terms of emulating and embodying human virtues, I will suggest a few proven practices that support the work on yourself. I can't actually see that far. How much time do I have left?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I'll let you get the slides so we can study them later. To conclude my review of virtues for how we can grow as adults, I'd like to restate why adult development theories matter. They can often explain differences and conflicts among human beings that are not due to difference in personality type, culture, religion, and politics. Remember Gauguin's questions? He asked, where do we come from? Who are we? And where are we going? Above all, adult development theories can reunite us in our common humanity to understand where we come from, where we are in our own becoming, and to appreciate the journeys of our fellow human beings, both as individuals and as collectives. By showing up today, you have indicated your curiosity and your commitment to become a self-leader. I invite you to experiment today and beyond with taking some small risks in getting to know others, strangers that you would not readily connect with in your everyday life. How might this expand your view of who you are and who you can become? Thank you for letting me share my perspective on adult development by focusing on values. If we develop ourselves to the most mature people we can be, we can model and what self-leadership requires and inspire those we wish to lead and develop. I think that is the end of my thing.